Well, I'm so glad again to get to see you today. And I just want to emphasize something that Pastor Anastasia mentioned. We have this children's ministries concert. It's a great Graceville concert at 4 p.m. on December 26th. In order to watch that, you need to be a part of the Graceville ministry on YouTube. And so go to YouTube and search for Graceville Ministries. And just as soon as you get to the home page for Graceville Ministries on YouTube, you have an opportunity to subscribe. Now, I know how easy it is because, can I confess, I just did it about an hour ago. All this time, I haven't subscribed to Graceville Ministries, and Anastasia was telling me that many people haven't. And now I realize she was telling me this story so I would go do it. So I subscribed this morning, Pastor Anastasia, and I encourage you as a church family to support this and to subscribe. In subscribing, it changes some of the logarithms and all kinds of stuff, and it makes it possible for more people to see it. So I encourage you to subscribe sometime very soon, and then to tune in on the 26th. The 8 lights and the one true light. The priest prepared the sacrifice as he had done many times before. The sacrifice had to be made daily, and it had to be made according to very specific instructions given by the God himself. And although this priest had performed this sacrifice many times, he had never sacrificed on this altar before. As a matter of fact, it was the first sacrifice on this new altar. It was in the temple in Jerusalem. It was in the temple of the Jews. It was in the temple that had been rebuilt. It's called the Second Temple. The first temple, the Solomon's temple, had been destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. And then it had been rebuilt by Joshua and Zerubbabel. And this second temple was not nearly as magnificent as Solomon's had been. But it was God's house nonetheless. Here the Jews had worshiped and sacrificed to Jehovah for over 350 years. And so on this altar, the priest stood. He elevated his knife to kill the sacrifice. And with the words, "For you, Zeus," he cut the neck of the pig. And the pig blood squirted all over the altar in the temple of God in Jerusalem. A pig, you say? A pig sacrificed in the Jewish temple? Yes, that is what Hanukkah is all about. It's this act of desecration on December 16 in the year 156 BC. The anniversary is coming up in just a couple days. 2,175 years ago. See, for several years, Jerusalem and its surroundings had been ruled by a Greek pagan king. When Alexander the Great had died, his kingdom, you probably remember this story from evangelistic series that you have attended. When Alexander the Great died, his kingdom was divided amongst 4 generals, and a general named Ptolemy got Palestine and Egypt, and a less known general, his name was Seleucus, got Syria and north and east of Syria. Later on, however, the descendants of Seleucus fought, and they won Palestine away from the Ptolemies. And so the king who did that was a king named Antiochus III. Now, for those of you who don't love history, I'll try to spare you too much. But it was this pagan Greek king, Antiochus III, who ruled over Jerusalem. And when he came to be the king over Jerusalem, he was a relatively benevolent king. He allowed the Jews to practice their religion, and things went well for many years. However, when Antiochus III died, his son, a particularly ruthless man, came to the throne over this section of Palestine and the Middle East. His name, we call him Antiochus IV. He was the son of Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the son of Antiochus III, and this Antiochus IV took another name, Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, the word Epiphanes means manifested is the God. So Antiochus Epiphanes, in essence, is claiming that he is a god. And when he came to be the god, or when he came to be the king, he declared himself the God, and he made the observance of Judaism punishable by death. He ordered them to worship Greek gods. He ordered them to bow down to the Greek gods. He forbade circumcision. He seized the temple of Jehovah in Jerusalem. He built an altar to Zeus, and there on that altar to Zeus, he sacrificed pigs. Now, that would be bad, but for Jews especially, their hatred of pigs, it's unclean. I mean, it was even a greater atrocity. He also allowed the sacred precincts of the Jewish temple to be used for sacred prostitution. The temple was desecrated. Now, some of you might have heard of Antiochus Epiphanes before. He was a particular favorite of a guy named Desmond Ford, who Antiochus Epiphanes figures very heavily in his theology. I don't have time to chase that today, but just in case you say, I've heard that name before, that's probably why. Well, you would not be surprised that there was quickly a Jewish resistance. And it was in a little town near Jerusalem named Modin. After about 20 years of this outrage, of this abuse and disgrace, that some Seleucid officials came to Modin and gathered the villagers and required that they would give obeisance to the god and to Antiochus Epiphanes. They were asked to bow down to an idol and to eat pig meat. Now, of course, bowing down to another idol was forbidden in the Ten Commandment law. Eating pig meat was, according to the kosher laws, not to be done. So both of these things that they were being asked to do were forbidden in Jewish law. The high priest at that time, even though he wasn't allowed to practice the high priesthood, the high priest was a man named Mattathias. When it came to be his turn in time, the officials told him to bow down to this idol of Zeus and to eat the pig meat. And what he did started a revolution. First off, they knew he wouldn't do it. And so one of the villagers said, I'll do it for him. And the official said, no, he has to do it. And so at that point in time, Mattathias grabbed the sword of the nearest soldier and plunged it into the chest of the official. And Mattathias had 5 sons, and his sons were there, and they attacked the remaining soldiers, and all of them were killed. All of the Greeks were killed. And so began the resistance. So began the revolution. And against unbelievable odds, the Jews won. The Jews drove out Antiochus and his armies from Jerusalem within just a couple years. Within about 5 years. When Mattathias died, his son Judah took over. We have coins minted of all of these sons of Mattathias, but his son Judah took over and kind of carried it through. And I just love Judah's nickname. He was called Judah the Hammer. It would be a good name for a WWE wrestler, wouldn't it? Judah the Hammer. Now, if you're interested in reading about this, you can read about this in the book of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. That's where we find this history. And it was a family called the Hasmoneans, or the Maccabeans. And ultimately, they liberated the temple, which had been desecrated, and had to be rededicated, which is what the word Hanukkah means, dedication. And so they rededicated the temple. This year, Hanukkah started in the Jewish nation on December 10. So we are in the 8 days of Hanukkah right now, just by a couple of days. Started at sundown, you wouldn't be surprised to learn, on December 10. Now, when they rededicated the temple, they had to build a new altar. They had to make new vessels, which had also been desecrated. And they wanted to rededicate the candlestick, the 7-branch candlestick called the menorah. And they wanted to do it in a special way, but they knew that it would take, they knew they didn't have enough oil because they wanted it to burn 8 days. And it would take 8 days to prepare new oil according to the kosher way. And all they could find was one pottery cruse full of oil that had been properly prepared, had been blessed in the right way, preparing oil for olive oil for the menorah required it to be the first pressing of oil, so they had to collect olives and press them, and so the first most pure pressing of olive oil could only be used in the temple. But all they could find is one flask of this pure, undefiled oil, and so they put it into the menorah, into the lamps of the menorah, they lit them, and it burned for 8 days. 1 day supply burned for 8 days. Hence, we have the miracle of Hanukkah and the celebration of the rededication, which I said before means Hanukkah. Now, this is not a biblical feast. There are 7 prescribed biblical feasts in the Old Testament. This was not a feast given to Moses. But according to 1 Maccabees 4:59, it says, Judah and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 5th and 20th day of the month of Kislev, with mirth and gladness. And so today, Jews, after all these years, Jews still celebrate Hanukkah with the lighting of the candles. Now, even though I'm not going to light it in the traditional Jewish way, which is a new candle every day. The first candle is lit on the first day, and then the first and second candle is lit on the second day. And so if you buy a whole set of menorah candles, there are about 45. But today I'm going to light them with my first century AD lighter here in a less than traditional way. Now, here's an interesting fact that you might not have thought of, but why is it that the menorah, the Hanukkah menorah, has 9 candles? I thought you said that it was 8 days long. Yes, it is, but the middle candle is sometimes taller, and it is used oftentimes as the one used to light all of the candles. It's a special candle, and so it's oftentimes taller, but it is the one that lights all the rest. Keep that in mind for just a second. And so The Jews celebrate the feast, the festival of Hanukkah for 8 days. Now, here's something strange that you probably never thought of, but I actually believe the story of Hanukkah is true. Many people refer to it as the myth, but I believe it's true. And here's why. At the point in time when this happened, 160 plus BC, the Jews are still God's chosen people. Their final rejection of Jesus has not happened. It won't happen for another 150 years, 160 years. So the Jews are still God's chosen people. The temple in Jerusalem was still central to worship. God wanted the temple to be rededicated. And so I believe that God would perform such a miracle in order to rededicate the temple. So I believe the story of Hanukkah is true. I don't think there would be anything wrong with a Christian, or as Jewish people would call us Gentiles, the Goyim, would be nothing wrong for us to celebrate Hanukkah in some way. Now here's the question. Is Hanukkah found in the Bible? It's a bit of a trick question, because you would have to answer the question, which Bible? That would be the first question you'd have to ask, because the book of 1st and 2nd Maccabees is in the Catholic Bible. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, it was also in the first edition, 1611 edition of the King James Version. It wasn't until later that it was dropped out of the King James Version. So, since 1st and 2nd Maccabees are found in the Catholic Bible, you would say, yes, it is found in the Bible. But it's also found more explicitly in the Bible. John chapter 10. John chapter 10, starting with verse 22. It says, at that time, the Feast of Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Zollman. And so this Feast of Dedication that's spoken of here in John 10, most commentators believe this is Hanukkah. And so Jesus himself was celebrating Hanukkah, a Feast of Dedication. And it was during this time that they're pressing him with this question. If you read the whole story here, how long, they ask him, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. Tell us plainly. Well, there was suspicion because Old Testament prophecies seem to point forward to Jesus. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, we have a prophecy that pointed forward to Jesus. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. It says, the people who walked in darkness. It's talking about the people in Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. Verse 2, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. If you go to the book of Matthew chapter 4, verses 13 through 16, Matthew quotes this verse in Isaiah and says, Jesus fulfilled that when he went up to Galilee. So it was foretold that a light would come, and the light would be the light of the world. And Jesus, according to Matthew, fulfilled that light. But here's a further prophecy from the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 42, verse 6. Isaiah 42, verse 6. I am the Lord. God is speaking to Israel. I am the Lord. I have called you in righteousness. I will take you by the hand and keep you. I will give you as a covenant for the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, and to bring prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison, those who sit in darkness. Here's a prophecy of Isaiah that Israel will be a light to the Gentiles. Was that fulfilled? No, it wasn't. They had lost the way. They had not taken the light of the world that God had intended for them to spread over the whole world. They had not taken that light to them. And so Jesus came to try to rekindle the flame. But because when Jesus came, they did not recognize him. They had been unfaithful to what he had asked them to do. It's fascinating to me that in John chapter 10, I've already referred to it, the Jews said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Just a few days before, in John chapter 8. By the way, the theme of light is one of the favorite themes in the book of John. John chapter 8. Verse 12. Jesus is out amongst the people. Again, Jesus said to them, saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." What do you mean? Tell us plainly. He had told them plainly. He is the light of the world. Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." And as I say, this whole concept of light is one of John's favorite themes. So I want you to turn back with me to John chapter 1. You saw some of these scriptures on the nice little video at the beginning of our service. John chapter 1. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Here's Jesus. He is the Word. The Greek word for word is logos. You've heard that before. He is the logos. But it also says he is the light. The word for light is phos. We get our English word photon from that word. Other words, photography, light. And so Jesus here, John is pointing to him as the light of the world. It continues talking about Jesus. Down in verse 9. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. Now that's a very interesting word. The true light. When you say something is true, what's the implication? There's a false. So there are lots of false lights. But John says the true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. John continuing to focus the light upon Jesus. And then in verse 14, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." Have you ever noticed in the book of John there's no nativity text? There's no birth narrative. You have the one in Matthew, you have one in Luke. Mark does not have one. And John does not have one of the nativity. But this is John's Christmas text, verse 14. "And Word was made flesh and dwelt among us." That's talking about him being born as a baby, you see, in Bethlehem. This is the nativity text in John. Now you might ask, why didn't he give a nativity scene and the wise men and the shepherds coming? And people have asked that question. Why didn't he? And I think here's the answer. Because Matthew and Luke already had. John is the last gospel written. I believe John had read Matthew and Luke. He knew what was coming. I think that's why John is so different. Because he's trying to fill in the cracks that he thought Matthew and Luke left, you see. So it's a very, very different look at Jesus in the Gospel of John. It says he dwelt among us, and the word dwelt is the word that is also translated the tent or tabernacle. You know, Jesus, when he dwelt among us, was the fulfillment of all of the sanctuary and all of the tabernacle. Every symbol, every festival in the Jewish economy, Jewish spiritual economy, every festival, every symbol found their fulfillment in Jesus. He's the light of the world. He's the bread of life. He's the sacrifice. He's our intercessor. He's the one who offers our prayers to God like the incense coming off the altar of incense. He's everything. Every symbol finds its fulfillment in Jesus. He's the light of the world, the 7-branch candlestick. He is the one true light. Do you remember I told you that in many Hanukkah menorahs, the middle one is higher and it's the lighter of all the rest of them? I think that there is a symbol of Jesus in that. He is the one light that from which all other light receives their light. So even though you won't read this too many places, I think Jesus and the lighting of the menorah is actually a symbol of Jesus himself. Now the problem is, Jesus, the light of the world, but the problem is there are so many lights to distract. People see the menorah, all they think about is Judaism, Hanukkah. That's what they think of. The lights of the menorah distract from the one true light. By the way, the idea of that center candle being a symbol of Jesus, many Jewish Christian believers believe that. But there's so many other lights to distract us. A couple years ago, of course they're not doing it this year because of COVID, but a couple of years ago, Candace and I and my son Nathan went down to the Nationals Park in D.C. They have a light show there called Enchant. I think they said there were 1 million lights on display. 1 million. It was gorgeous. It was fascinating to visit. They're not having it this year because of the COVID, but next year it says they have plans for it. Millions of lights and millions of displays. Christmas trees all over the place. You got the national Christmas tree. You actually have also this week, not only the lighting of the national Christmas tree a couple of weeks ago, but this week there was the lighting of the national menorah on the area there right in the downtown D.C. You have so many lights, so many things that clamor for our attention and distract us. I have often thought about how different the ancient world was than today. The ancient world was a very dark place. This provides some light. Of course, they didn't have candles in the time of Jesus. They were all oil lamps. And some of you know how I feel about oil lamps. Never met an oil lamp I didn't love. That's why I have about 300 of them in my collection at home. But the ancient world was a very dark place in comparison today. Because at night, all you had was this kind of light to light the way, or large torches. But any way you look at it, it was still not bright. But today, there's so many things to dazzle us. We have so much more light if you would measure it in lumens. But the problem is we don't have so much more light on many other things. Rather, those lights become distractions. There are the lights of getting, the lights of giving, the lights in our children's eyes when they see those gifts we bought them for Christmas. I've seen pictures taken of children standing by the Christmas tree and taken at such an angle that that the light of the Christmas tree actually reflects out of their eyes. There's lights of commercialism, the lights of partying. Many people celebrate Christmas by getting lit. You understand what I mean? They have to celebrate and get in the Christmas spirit with Christmas spirits. There's the light of the old man in the red suit. There's the light of the reindeer's red nose. So much to excite us everywhere around us. So much to take our attention off the one true light. And it will never go out. That one true light will never be extinguished. It will never go out. But sometimes it can be lost if we're not really careful. I hate the two phrases I'm about to say because they're so trite. We use them so often, but I still think they're good phrases. So I'm going to share them. We have to keep Christ in Christmas. Now, we say that, but do we do it? Jesus is the reason for the season. It's true. But sometimes we really need to be reminded to practice this. Because there are so many things to distract us. I have found through the years that in order to keep my focus on the one true light, that I have to work hard to do it. I have to plan to do it. Christmas is also a very, very busy season, of course, as you know. There's so many things that we have to do. And if we're not careful, they can distract us from what really matters. Right now, there's so much darkness around. Seems like everyone is just consumed with problems that we're having in our society. You know, we become aware of the fact that for the first time ever, we won't see our children, our grandchildren at Christmas. My wife made the statement at Thanksgiving. She said, when we figured out we weren't going to be able to get together at Thanksgiving, my wife said, well, I can deal with that. I'm okay with that, just as long as we get Christmas. And that's fallen through. Just as long as we get Christmas. There's so much darkness around us, so it is up to us to do everything we can to make a plan, to make sure that on Christmas we view again the one true light. And so I encourage you to make a plan right now that somehow you're going to do something very significant to focus your attention and your family's attention on that one true light. In our home, when our children were growing up, we would, before we opened Christmas presents, we would always take time to have family worship. And we would always read My Bible Friends when our children were small, and let's just be honest, we've done it when our children are old because it's a tradition. Clip, clop, went small donkey's hooves as he some of you know this, right? My Bible Friends. Take time to read the story from Scripture and focus on the one true light. Read it from Scripture. Read it from the Desire of Ages. Focus your attention. You know, if you started reading one chapter a day from the Desire of Ages in the new year, you would end about Easter. You would end about Easter. Now, I've done that, and it is quite a commitment because some of those chapters are pretty long. But I guarantee you, it will focus your attention. You know, what I like to do to focus my attention on the one true light is I like to put my earphones on. This doesn't work if you have them on speakers. But I like to put my earphones on and put on the Messiah. Something about listening to it in earphones gives you all the nuances of the music that's lost in the speakers and the air. I don't know why, but I like to put my earphones on and listen to the Messiah and let it go into my bones. One of my favorites is the tenor aria, the comfort ye, my people. If we need comfort, Jesus is there. Comfort ye, my people. We can't get together with friends very much, and I don't know if you've ever tried to sing Christmas carols with each other on Zoom, but it does not work. You cannot sing on Zoom, but you can sing on FaceTime. Tried it. It works. Since we can't see our friends, still reach out to our friends. Of course you're going to reach out to our family, but reach out to your friends. Send them messages. Do something to focus your attention on the one true light. One year, my family, wanting to do that, and just to really get realism, we went to a farm and went out into where the cows live, and they didn't make preparation for us and run the vacuum before we got there. So we got the real experience. Focusing our attention. Think about the gifts you give to people. Can you somehow make those gifts spiritual in nature? A book or a plaque or some way to make them spiritual in nature. Plan this season to be a festival of lights in your house, pointing to the one true light. We're going to sing as we close here, and I just invite you to sing along with us. Oh, come, let us adore him.
Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord. Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord. Sing choirs of angels, sing in exaltation. Oh, sing, all ye citizens of heaven above. Glory to God, oh, glory in the highest. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Christ the Lord. Make this your prayer as we conclude our service. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore adore.